Hey boot campers, it's Cable here with South Edmonton Fit Body Boot Camp, and today we're going to talk about some basics about food and specifically how food works in our body and how that's going to help you achieve your fitness goals. So to start off, we know there are three basic macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about carbohydrates in particular and what happens to them in our body and how the other macronutrients will affect that. I believe that this is one of the most technical fundamentals for in terms of understanding about nutrition if you're serious about changing your body. So let's talk about carbohydrates for a minute. They typically are the largest part of our diet. They're the things that we enjoy the most, the things that often taste the best, and they have a very specific role in our body. Their primary thing is to be the primary source of fuel for our body for movement and everything else. But it also gets involved, as do the other building blocks of kind of every process of our body in terms of tissue replacement, recovery, repair, and all those things. Anyhow, let's talk about carbohydrates and what goes on. This quick little graph here is going to help me illustrate what happens when we eat different carbohydrates. If we were eating a big plate of vegetables, okay, things like broccoli, things like cauliflower, things like celery, they're very, very low in terms of calories per volume, and they're very hard typically for our body to digest or break down. So specifically, we're interested in what happens as things break down. As it breaks down in the stomach and enters our bloodstream, we get a very, very, very slow rise in our blood sugar, okay? And as our blood sugar rises very slowly, we get a very small secretion from our pancreas of insulin, which goes to work at delivering that glucose and carbohydrate to the different cells in our body where it can be used as energy or other resources. Comparatively, okay, if we have something like sugar, if we have something like a baked potato, if we have something like a processed cereal, my favorite to pick on is Special K. Okay, when we put that in the stomach, we see a much sharper rise in terms of blood sugar. It happens much, much faster. Your body breaks it down quicker. It enters the bloodstream faster. Because it enters faster and your blood sugar goes higher, the pancreas secretes more insulin. Okay, so when your body is delivering that glucose that's now in the bloodstream to the different cells, the truth is that you may find that the cells are full. They don't require any more glucose depending on where this is in your day, when you last exercised, okay? Because when you're at boot camp and you're sweating like crazy and you're using those intervals to burn lots of calories, what do you think your body is primarily using to drive your body and move that motion? I know we wish it was fat, but the truth is it's using a lot of carbohydrate that's stored in your body. So when those stores are depleted, it starts to find alternative energy sources, okay, which is why the afterburn effect or using the intervals of boot camp is actually so important for making progress in the shortest time possible, because that half-hour boot camp is actually stimulating your metabolism to burn more calories for many hours after you work out. Okay, so if we compare just these two scenarios, pre-workout, having a big secretion of insulin. Actually, let's back up for a second. Let's talk about what happens to carbohydrates that can't be used immediately in cells. Your body has to do something with it, okay? It can't just float around in your bloodstream and accumulate, because that's basically what diabetes is, okay? Your body's inability to rid the bloodstream of that glucose, depending on whether you're type 1, type 2. So, pre-workout, we have all this extra energy. What does your body do with it? Well, it starts to convert or secrete other enzymes that will take that carbohydrate, break it down, and ultimately reassemble it into a triglyceride. Okay, does that name sound or word sound familiar? If it doesn't, basically what we're talking about now is fat. Okay, so your body is going to reassemble that extra glucose into triglycerides in an effort to store them for later, for times of trouble where there might not be energy sustenance available, like post-workout, right? Because we've now depleted those stores of carbohydrate, so your body is looking for, in a way, to subsidize its energy requirements with alternate means, okay? And this is where we can burn off some body fat. So this is why the boot camp program can be so effective, because post-workout, we are stimulating your metabolism to burn more calories than it normally does for an extended period of time. If our carbohydrate stores are depleted, then where there's a possibility that we may burn some body fat as our body lets go of some of its reserve energy. If we can combine that with avoiding high glycemic foods or carbohydrates that break down very quickly, okay, we can compound that effect. So if we can keep our blood sugar lower as a whole, okay, we have less insulin secretions, and ultimately we can deplete our carbohydrate stores and burn more body fat. Versus if we're using high carbohydrate meals, we have higher secretions of insulin, making it harder to burn more body fat. You also notice in this chart, this also creates another problem. What do these valleys mean? Those valleys mean that your blood sugar gets really low. You get those feelings of mental fog, the tiredness that people often experience 11 a.m., 3 p.m., those kind of times. You get those urges, cravings, and crashes where you feel like you need to have that quick energy, that quick buzz, where we either go pour another cup of coffee or grab a chocolate bar or both, right? So we can basically set our body up to drive us with the right or different messages that will ultimately lead and control our behavior. We can also determine how our success is going to be from exercise based on what we're doing with our blood sugar. Now, I don't know about you, but I can only eat so many vegetables, okay? And I've never truly enjoyed them. Well, guess what? And great news is there's an alternative to just eating vegetables as your primary source of carbohydrate. Anytime that we mix other macronutrients such as fat and protein, which are both more difficult to digest and break down than things like potatoes, sugar, and processed cereals, we actually change what happens in the stomach and start to alter this curve. Okay, so the same potatoes, processed cereals, etc., if you mix them with some protein, okay, or a whole fat source, we can actually alter that curve so that it becomes less. Okay, so the good news is that we are not confined to just eating vegetables or low glycemic foods. We can enjoy just about any food that you want if you understand how to combine them properly and the time as to when to consume them in an effort to get the most from your activity in those increased metabolic states. I'm sure this is probably a bit confusing. It's something that has played an intrinsic role in what we've done with clients for decades, basically. And it's not uncommon for people to not fully understand it, but at least it helps maybe understand or address a couple of the whys, which may ultimately make it easier to make that next decision when you're choosing your food choices, or the next time your trainer explains why you should or shouldn't eat certain things at certain times, you have a better understanding as to why. Anyway, hopefully that helps somebody. I'll catch you next week, and I'm going to teach you guys some more stuff.